This video in my course Introduction to Developmental Psychology is about emotional development. I cover, in order, emotional intelligence, the strange situation, attachment and growing up, learning emotional regulation, and finally, the neurobiology of emotional development. My name is Jouni Vilkka, and this is my channel, TFF, Teacher from Finland. Be sure to click the thumbs up button and subscribe. Emotional development is closely connected to the development of social cognition, meaning the processes used in social situations, such as storing and applying information about other people and about different kinds of social situations. The ability to recognize emotions in oneself and in others cannot develop without normal brain development and a lot of interaction with others. Social and emotional cognition develop gradually and make possible the important ability called empathy. It may not have occurred to you, but the abilities required to recognize emotions, to express them, and to regulate them are actually skills. It is possible to learn and improve those skills. Emotional intelligence has to do with those skills. You have probably heard of it before. It includes two separate aspects: intrapersonal and interpersonal emotional intelligence. The first is awareness of factors affecting your own emotions and the ability to intentionally influence them and how they affect you. The second is about recognizing and predicting the emotions of others and even influencing them. Emotional intelligence and empathy develop in childhood, starting in early infancy. Learning to recognize and express emotions requires interaction with others. Especially attachment to one's mother or other primary caregiver in infancy is important. Normally, by the end of their first year, infants are able to recognize other people's emotional states from their faces and react to expressions of negative emotions by becoming anxious. In their second year, they learn to cause emotions in others by bullying or consoling them. By the end of the third year, they are able to imagine another person's emotional state. By the end of the fourth year, they have learned some emotional regulation and the ability to hide their emotions, at least to some extent. They are also able to distinguish their own emotional state from that of another person, which they could not previously do. By 6 years of age, they should be able to recognize a variety of emotions and be able to use emotions as well. They also should have learned empathy by then, to understand how others feel in different situations or circumstances. Attachment and its importance to development was first studied by John Bowlby. He emphasized the interactive and reciprocal nature of the relationship between the child and the parents. An important part of forming this bond begins when the child is still a baby, when the parents develop a kind of communication called synchrony with the baby. The baby uses crying, smiling, cooing and other baby noises to communicate what it wants. The adult has to engage the baby in this conversation, while of course caring for the baby's needs for the bond to grow. According to Bowlby, the infant's attachment develops through 4 stages. In the first stage, up to the first 3 months, babies are non-focused orienting and signaling, meaning that they signal to anyone and everyone around to get what they need. After this, to 6 months, babies are more directed, focusing on a smaller number of people to direct their course to. They are also less responsive to unfamiliar people. From 6 months to 2 years of age, they exhibit secure base behavior. This is when true attachment emerges. The baby seeks proximity and tends to cling to their caregivers, mostly the primary caregiver. After 2 years, the internal model phase begins, when the child is able to imagine how an anticipated action might affect their bond with the caregivers. An important experiment to study the development of attachment between children and their primary caregivers, originally only mothers, is called the strange situation. It was developed by Mary Ainsworth in the 1970s, and others have added to it over the years. For what follows, it is important to know that starting at around 6 or 7 months, children start to display a fear of strangers. Also, from about 8 months, they experience separation anxiety when separated from their primary caregiver. This anxiety increases until 13 or 15 months, after which it begins to decline. Infants about 2 years old usually no longer exhibit this fear. The strange situation experiment tests the behavior of 12 to 20 months old infants, and specifically how they react to a strange circumstance. The experiment has 5 distinct steps. First, the child is brought to a playroom by its mother. There is plenty to explore there, such as different kinds of toys. In the next step, a stranger comes into the room. The stranger talks to the mother and then approaches the child. In the third step, the mother leaves the room, making sure the child sees her leave. In the fourth step, if the child seems to be in need of it, the stranger will try to comfort the child. Finally, the mother returns and picks up her child. The stranger leaves, making sure the child sees them leave. The idea is to observe the behavior of the child at each step and that way assess the attachment of the child to its mother. The different behaviors of the children during the experiment led the researchers to define 4 types of attachment, and a 5th was added later. The first attachment type, or style, or pattern, is called secure. If the mother, or other parent, but originally only mothers were used, is sensitive to the child, or the needs of the child, and behaves consistently toward the child is able to predict their behavior. They can learn models for emotion regulation and have the courage to express themselves. They are more social and empathic than other children. There are 2 types of insecure attachment. The first is called anxious avoidant. In this case, the parent does not consider the child's emotions and needs. The child doesn't show much emotion and avoids other people. When the parent returns, the child does not react to this. The other insecure attachment type is called anxious ambivalent. The parent behaves impulsively and inconsistently. The child, therefore, has no means of protection against dangers. Their expressions of emotions are strong and they are difficult to console. They have an ambivalent relationship with the parent. The 4th type of attachment is called disorganized. It is neither secure nor insecure. The child's environment is chaotic. They freeze instead of seeking protection. Their behavior may seem almost normal, but they might display painful expressions or other strange symptoms. Finally, there is also a rare attachment type called RAD, or reactive attachment disorder. It also is neither secure nor insecure. It is caused by repeated experiences of abandonment. There are 2 subtypes of this disorder. In one, the child is socially uninhibited with strangers, and in the other, the child is inhibited, avoiding all social contact. The main takeaway from this research seems to be that the parent's sensitivity to the needs of the child is important. Parents who are properly sensitive are able to react adequately and consistently on an emotional and behavioral level because they can understand the child's point of view and see the child as an individual with a mind, thoughts, and will of its own. They also don't direct their frustrations or annoyance at the child. This type of parenting is correlated with the best future developments of the child. Different types of attachment in infancy seem to influence behavior even in adulthood. Securely attached infants typically grow up into balanced, open, and extroverted adults. Insecurely attached infants grew into adults who displayed different problems depending on their specifically defined attachment type in infancy, according to a Finnish study by Kaisa Männikkö. Those who have been defined as clinging as infants were afraid of being abandoned in adulthood. Those who had a fearful attachment in infancy may feel unjustified insecurity and loneliness in adulthood. Those who were defined as self-sufficiently attached grew to be distrustful in their relationship. Those who had been securely attached could, as adults, more easily regulate their behavior in conflict situations and had a more stable feeling of being accepted. The securely attached, in general, develop better social skills, have more intimate friendships, and a higher self-esteem during adolescence than those who were insecurely attached as infants. The securely attached will also be more likely to get better grades and be rated as leaders. The insecurely attached are likely to become sexually active earlier and to practice riskier sex as adolescents. The quality of attachment also affects the child's own parenting style when they grow up and have children of their own. Securely attached individuals are more responsive and sensitive toward their own children, and those with insecure attachment seem to be more likely to view their own infants negatively. Emotional self-regulation is learned best with the support of an adult. A newborn has no way to really regulate its emotions, so at first it is up to the caregivers to do it for the baby. They can thus also help the infant to develop its own ability to regulate its emotions and their expressions, but it will take a lot of time. In fact, even adults often seem to be in need of some help in that regard. Culture very much influences how emotions are expressed. While even genetic differences between populations might lead to a prevalence of specific temperaments, thus leading to different ways of expressing emotions, it seems obvious that cultural norms are more significant in this. For example, the Tamang in rural Nepal are reported to scold their children older than 2 years for any sign of aggression. Parents in some other cultures and more dangerous circumstances, for example, in poor and violent areas in the US, have been observed to encourage aggressive expressions of anger in situations related to self-defense. Emotion regulation can involve the physical reaction one has, the behaviors related to emotion, such as expressions of emotions and one's own experiences. The principles of the zone of proximal development that Vygotsky is famous for apply here as well. One should not demand too much of the child. For example, an infant under 4 years old is unable to control or even tolerate frustration. It's not that they don't want to, they are just not yet developed enough to do it themselves and so require the help of an adult. All individuals naturally want to control the emotions and especially the stress they experience. The parents can help their child learn ways to calm down. When they support the child, they enable the child to reach an optimal zone of development, where the challenge is just enough and not too much above their independent ability. This way, the child is able to adopt new skills to regulate their own emotions. The temperamental differences between children mean that they have to be treated as the individuals they are. Some need more or different kinds of support than others. Howard Leventhal has theorized that there are 3 levels of development for emotions. These levels, once reached, are active simultaneously. The later levels are more advanced, and it is possible to not be able to use them in some situations. So despite having reached higher levels, a child might unconsciously activate a lower level. The levels are as follows. The first is nonverbal, based on our species-specific forms of emotions. Once the infant begins to distinguish itself as an individual, it begins to mimic the behaviors of others. The infant now develops emotion structures based on internal experiences and memory. Later, the child learns to regulate emotions with the help of concepts. This is made possible by the ability to name emotions and discuss them. Mentalization is an important part of emotional development. It includes learning to understand the connections between mental states and behavior in others as well as oneself. Between 4 and 6 years of age, the child learns that others can see the same thing differently. Proper development of mentalization requires good attachment. An unstable environment in infancy can lead to an insecure attachment, which tends to slow down the development of the brain mechanisms that control stress and emotions. The mother's use of alcohol during pregnancy may also influence the brain of the fetus this way. Even the mother's stress during pregnancy has adverse effects to the developing fetus by affecting the development of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. This structure manages stress reactions, influences digestion and the functioning of the immune system, emotions, and sexual behavior. The child then has an increased risk of depression, heart and cardiovascular disease, and metabolic disorder. Chronic stress seems to affect the hippocampus, causing difficulties in learning. Secure attachment in early infancy is important. It can protect the infant from the effects of stress that otherwise may cause developmental disorders in the connections between different areas of the brain. Such disorders can hamper social interaction and emotional reactions, the ability to show empathy and regulate emotional reactions. The primary caregiver's depression impairs interaction, which has a negative influence on the development of the infant's brain. Children raised by depressed mothers may develop brain activity that will be permanently different from others. During adolescence, there is a significant reorganization in the functioning of the brain, involving increased connections and cooperation between the hemispheres of the brain that seems to affect emotional development. It is very common for adolescents and young adults to suffer from depression. I certainly did, and at some point I realized that most of my young adult friends had at least at some point been diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or something similar. Depression is not a negative emotion, although such emotions are obviously connected to it as well. Actual depression is a negative mood that has a long duration and that involves the difficulty to experience pleasure, among other things. It usually leads to social withdrawal and can include a constant feeling of exhaustion. A depressed person may be sad, they may cry, or they may be unusually irate or uncaring, even self-destructive. This last can cause risk behavior, such as alcohol and drug abuse, or even self-mutilation. While depression certainly shouldn't be thought of as only due to brain development in adolescence, about 90% do get better, although there is a risk of recurrence. The earlier the diagnosis, the better the prognosis, so seek help early. I hope this brief look into emotional development was helpful to you. I added a bit about depression because it is one of the major problems that especially a lot of young people face, and it is very deadly. The next video will be about the development of identity. I hope to see you back on my channel soon. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.